Hey there, welcome to That Dang Dad. My name is Phil, and tonight, let's talk a little Tears of the Kingdom. This is just a light and breezy discussion, no story spoilers, just a few thoughts and reflections while I cruise around Hyrule. As a gamer of a certain age, one of the first video games I ever played was the original Legend of Zelda for the Nintendo Entertainment System. I remember walking to my friend's house and us loading it up and being completely lost. We would dither around for an hour, find a temple, maybe not get through it, game over, repeat. If we were really lucky, some neighborhood kid had a copy of Nintendo Power with a map or hints on how to do stuff, but I don't think I ever actually sat down and beat it all the way through. I did beat Legend of Zelda 2, which was hard as balls, by the way. Where's my parade? Anyway, my favorite was always Link to the Past. I've replayed that quite a few times, and I think it's one of the best Super Nintendo games ever made. For no particular reason, I never got into Zelda games after that, though, so my experience with the franchise ended there with your standard go to 8 temples, find 8 Whatsits, kill Ganon with the Master Sword kind of loop. I don't own a Switch, so in 2017 I remember watching people get really into Breath of the Wild and being kind of jealous. It looked like a lot of zany fun, and it seemed like a wild departure from the Zeldas of my youth. So when Tears of the Kingdom dropped this year, I decided to, get it and play it. Wink! Fans of the channel know that I'm a FromSoft head, and Elden Ring was one of my games of the year last year, so I'm sure the big question is, how do I feel about Elden Ring versus Tears of the Kingdom? They're both gigantic open-world adventures with lots of weapons and abilities and flexibility in how you proceed, so it's natural to compare the two. And for me, the answer is that they are two very different games that scratch two very different itches. Elden Ring and FromSoft games in general are very mechanically tight when it comes to movement and combat, which are basically the two main verbs you get in those games. Part of the pleasure of Elden Ring was finding equipment that felt fun to use and then crafting a playstyle that gelled well with that equipment. My first run was a no-shield Unga Bunga cave woman wielding a gigantic club. My next playthrough was a glass cannon mage who would die in 2 hits, but who could zap most bosses to death in 60 seconds if I could manage to take the shot. Tears of the Kingdom, on the other hand, has a lot more verbs to play with. In addition to traversal and combat, you do stuff like build contraptions and craft meals and snap photos and solve physics puzzles. There's a lot more NPCs to interact with and a lot more side quests to do that change the state of the world, like influencing a local mayoral race or helping create a monster museum. But, unlike Elden Ring, I find combat in Tears kinda sloppy. While I know you can achieve a high level of play with rocket shields and bullet time and auto-build stuff, an average encounter with a group of enemies just felt clunky to me. I was always getting hit from off-screen enemies, it was kind of hard to parse enemy tells or read who was doing what, but if I could get the upper hand with a shock fruit or a bomb flower, I could stunlock most enemies to death very easily. In Tears, for me, combat was about either getting past it quickly or puzzling out how to trivialize it. For example, raining down bombs from afar, or ultra-handing a beam weapon, or, in the case of Lionel's, using puff shrooms to keep them permanently blinded and non-hostile while I wailed on them. Compare this with Elden Ring, where I was eager to try out a new weapon or a new spell on enemies and test out how my new skills did against earlier combat set pieces. And this isn't a knock against Tears, by the way. Like I said, these are two different games that scratch two different itches. In Elden Ring, I took pleasure in being a combat murder machine, dodging and flipping around skilled opponents in mortal combat. In Tears, I took pleasure in figuring out how to engage in as little combat as possible. However, in discussing this with my friend Star Panda, I realized that this informs another difference between Elden Ring and Tears for me: my desire to replay them. With Elden Ring, I immediately wanted to restart a new game with a new character and try new things, like rushing late-game weapons early, or using new spells that my meathead cave woman hadn't been able to. In Elden Ring, a first-time run is almost never going to see and do everything there is to see and do. With Tears, I was super addicted to it for a couple weeks. I decided to beat it just to get the obsession out of my brain, and afterwards I realized that my time with the game felt done. Satisfying, wonderful, memorable, pleasurable, but done. I had no urge to restart a new run, and when I continued on my current run and popped back into the world to do the 10,000 side quests that I ran past, I just didn't feel like it. I went from ravenously consuming this game to being almost totally over it. And I realized why. In Elden Ring, the design of the game limits the equipment and skills you can use normally in a run. If you're not farming experience to gain 400 levels, your average playthrough will only be able to use certain things in certain ways. You'll find armor that's too heavy for you, weapons that need more faith than you have, and talismans that don't relate to your build. So as you finish one playthrough, you'll be thinking about a future run that finally uses that boss weapon that you could never wield. But Tears has a totally different design philosophy. It's a giant sandbox that gives you hundreds of toys to play with. There are no builds in Tears of the Kingdom. You can swap armor on the fly and chug stat-boosting meals while falling off a cliff. Anything you find can be used at any time to do whatever you want. What this means, though, is that in a given playthrough of Tears, you're going to be able to try anything you want to try basically right then and there. Are you curious what happens if you shoot a Muddlebud at a battle talus while other enemies are riding it? Great, it's hilarious, go do it. Curious if a contraption can push a Gleeok off a cliff? You can try that right now. Wondering if that cold attack armor is any good? Head on over to Hebra and see. Is it more fun to use spears or swords? Keep both and decide on the fly. What I loved about Tears of the Kingdom was that it was incredibly generous in letting the player make their own fun. Very rarely did the game try to maintain balance or limit your actions to prevent you from making things too easy. Hell, I went into the final battle with only like 10 hearts and did just fine. You can fast travel away from any fight, you can bring contraptions almost anywhere. The game is willing to just roll with it. But what this means is that I was ready to finish the game when I had satisfied all my personal curiosities, which I was able to do in a single playthrough. I found my favorite fusions, I built my favorite gizmos, I had my favorite armor, I stocked up on my favorite meals, I beat the shit out of the Demon King, and that was that. And again, this is not a criticism of the game at all. In fact, it might be one of the most important compliments that I have for it. See, I'm 40. I'm the father of a toddler. I'm tired. I don't have endless time to fritter away on trivialities. I'm a busy man about town, buying low, selling high, making the big plays in the market on my grind set, getting that bread. My tie wears a little tie, that's how I roll. And as such, I very rarely want to play a single game for hundreds of hours. If you look at my GOTY list last year, I had Citizen Sleeper, Pentiment, Immortality, Norco, and Elden Ring. My playtime for each, respectively, was about 10 hours, 10 hours, 10 hours, 8 hours, and 300 hours. I love games that have something to say, something to show off, then get it done, and then end. I like when a game feels like a complete experience and not just a dopamine factory designed to keep me locked inside it forever. Looking at you, Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Dragon Age Inquisition. When I first realized the scope of Tears of the Kingdom, I was worried it was going to be like another Ubisoft game that just goes on forever, has too many inconsequential things to do, and just kind of drags on and on and on and on until I finally limp to an ending. Instead, what I got was a game that let me decide what I liked, let me decide how to enjoy it, and when I was ready to be done with it, let me just be done. The temples and story boss fights were fun without overstaying their welcome, the final battle gauntlet was sufficiently grand without feeling like padding, and the game ended with a spectacular final showdown and a beautiful conclusion. Tears of the Kingdom trusted me to essentially take responsibility for my own fun. It trusted me to go somewhere else when I got bored exploring the depths or got frustrated trying to collect materials for armor upgrades. It trusted me to figure out how the toys in the toy box work together, and trusted me to remember to use them when I got sick of raiding Bokoblin Camp number 82. And it trusted me to advance the story when I was ready to do so. Of course, this is a design decision with pros and cons. I know a lot of players like a more focused, balanced experience. A lot of players don't want the burden of creating their own spectacle. They want to play through an experience that has been handcrafted by people who know how to keep the player engaged. For many players, too much freedom can cause analysis paralysis or make them feel like they're missing out on something, or make them worry that they aren't doing things optimally. It's a really interesting design challenge that I run into in my day job designing software, finding that sweet spot between giving someone maximum agency while also not overwhelming them with options, decreasing the friction users experience getting to the tools they need without causing cognitive overload dumping everything on them all at once. And as a designer, eventually you realize that it's impossible to design one solution that perfectly satisfied both your grizzled power user and your inexperienced newbie. You have to figure out compromises, and it's really more of an art than a science figuring out which friction is annoying and which friction is necessary for people to be able to get a grip on your product. That's why, from a design perspective, I am extremely impressed with Tears of the Kingdom. I would kill to spend an afternoon talking to their UX team because a lot of thought and care went into making sure that the game was pleasurable for very different kinds of players. I'll give you an example. One of the powers you unlock is called Auto Build, and it lets you instantly recreate a contraption that you've already made and even designate favorites so that it's fast for you to make your beloved hover bike again and again. But the game also gives you schematics for pre-built contraptions that you can auto-build with. What this means is that a player who enjoys the mechanical creativity of building stuff can freestyle their own monstrosity all day long, and a different player whose brain just doesn't enjoy doing that can still whip up a plane or a boat from a schematic without having to muddle through it. And that's why the word I keep coming back to for Tears of the Kingdom is generous. The game is just very generous with its mechanics, very eager to make sure everyone is having a good time, very deferential to player choice, with all the good and bad that comes with it. I just really appreciated how much playfulness the game allowed, that this major title from a major developer in a flagship franchise was content to just let me goof off. And that's why I'm proud to give Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom a final score of 7 out of 10. Wink. In all seriousness, the game's great, but you don't need me to tell you that. This was just an excuse to capture a lot of footage of me boating around Hyrule, and an excuse for me to put off doing a more serious video. So let me hit you with a discussion topic for the comments. What's another game that you feel is very generous with the player in an uncommon way? Or tell me about a time a game was too generous with you and you wished it had been a little more tightened up. Anyway, thanks for watching, like and subscribe, make good choices, seal the darkness, catch you later, bye.